I tried and was just like, no, I'm giving up on that one.
So weird, okay. I'll break your actual ones.
Do you like my chocolate banana?
It's really good, yeah.
I know. All right, everybody, let's get started. We're gonna just start, even though not everybody's here. Let's pray. Good morning, Lord. Thank you for your word. Thank you that we get to have one more class. Lord, thank you then that we get Christmas break. Lord, we're looking forward to that. I pray that you just bless all of our Christmas, Lord. Help us to focus on you and celebrate you. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, what are you getting out of Acts? What are you learning? What are you liking? Noah?
I like the way it's told through Luke's perspective.
Yes.
I think that's really neat.
Yeah,
it's
and
not
just
like
seeing
they
Luke.
went to this place, we went to this place. I think it's super fascinating.
Yeah, it's cool to see Luke's just behind the scene perspective. What else? What else are you guys seeing in Acts? Is it fun reading a different portion of the story? Like we read all 4 Gospels. Are you enjoying getting more now? How many of you had read Acts before? Good. All right. So we're going to finish Acts today. So let's jump in. Let's start with, we're going to go to chapter 21. Tell me, what is happening with Paul right now? What is he doing?
Spreading the word.
Spreading the word. Yep, remember, go back to Acts 9:15. God says, you will be an instrument of mine. Right? You will be my instrument. I'm going to use you to share the gospel and to spread the word. Okay? So Paul is living up to that. He's doing that. He's spreading the word. Good morning. So go to Acts 21. When we had parted from them, 21:1, sorry. When we had parted from them and had set sail, we ran a straight course to Kos, and the next day to Rhodes, from there to Patara. Okay? Pull out your map. These all should be on your map. All of these places are map-worthy places. Does anybody need a map? You all got one? Okay, these are all going to be on this map. Because remember, this is Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria. Here's the ends of the earth that he's going to. Okay, so Patara, where he is right here. So he is spreading. He's heading toward, this is Greece. This is Italy. Okay? So he's heading that direction. He's moving the gospel farther and farther. What would that be? West. Right? He's moving it west. So they land in Patara. And he's taking ships now. Notice he's not walking. He's doing a lot more sailing. That speeds things up quite a lot. Go to verse 4. After looking up the disciples, they're tired now. After looking up the disciples, we stayed there 7 days. And they kept telling Paul, through the Spirit, not to set foot in Jerusalem. Underline that verse, or hold on to that verse, okay? Write it down, underline it, whatever you need to do. They told him not to go to Jerusalem. Why do you think he's not supposed to go to Jerusalem? Why do you think he's not supposed to go to Jerusalem? Or that people are warning him? Go back to Acts 9. Acts 9:15. Well, Acts 9:15 and 16. But the Lord said to him, talking to Ananias, go, for he is a chosen instrument of mine. This is Paul. He's a chosen instrument of mine to bear my name before the Gentiles. Has he done that? Yes, he has done that. To bear my name before the Gentiles and kings and sons of Israel. So has he borne his name before the sons of Israel? Has he told the Jews about Jesus? Yes, we've seen that a lot. Has he told the Gentiles about Jesus? So who is missing? Does he still need to tell? The kings. Okay? So God told him, you're gonna tell Israelites, you're gonna tell Gentiles, and you're gonna tell kings about me. So he has done these two. We only have 7 chapters of Acts left. We still have one to check off. Okay? And it says, verse 16, for I will show him how much he must suffer for my sake. Okay? It says, I will show him what he must suffer for my sake. So, go back to Acts 21. They kept telling Paul not to set through the Spirit, not to set foot in Jerusalem. Go to verse 11. They're hanging out there with the disciples. Go to verse 11. And coming to us, okay, go to 10. As we were staying there for some days, a prophet named Agabus came down from Judea, and coming to us, he took Paul's belt and bound his own feet and hands and said, this is what the Holy Spirit says. In this way, the Jews at Jerusalem will bind the man who owns this belt and deliver him into the hands of the Gentiles. When we had heard this, we as well as the local residents began begging him not to go to Jerusalem. Then Paul answered, what are you doing, weeping and breaking my heart? For I am ready not only to be bound, but even to die at Jerusalem for the name of the Lord Jesus. And since he would not be persuaded, we fell silent, remarking, the will of the Lord be done. Okay, so Paul goes, I will suffer for Christ's sake. Okay, so we have Acts 21. Is that 4? 4. And we have 10 through 14 talking about this is coming up. This prophecy is happening. Now, this isn't prophecy about the Messiah. This isn't prophecy. These are just people coming and saying, Paul, you realize what's coming. You realize that this is going to happen. So far, has he suffered? Has Paul suffered up to this point? Yeah. He's been stoned. He's been beaten. He's been dragged out of the city. They thought he was dead. Okay? He has suffered. But he has one more on his list. Right? And God doesn't fail what he promises. If he comes to Jackson and says, Jackson, I'm going to do this, this, and this, Jackson can hold on to that. Okay? He can hold on to that. Paul was told, you will bear my name to the Israelites, to the Gentiles, and to kings. And Paul goes, okay, if I have to go to Jerusalem and get imprisoned to do that, so be it. Verse 15. After these days we got ready and started on our way up to Jerusalem. Some of the disciples from Caesarea came along with us, taking us to Mnason of Cyprus, a disciple of long standing, with whom we were to lodge. After we arrived in Jerusalem, the brethren received us gladly, and the following day, Paul went in with us to James, and all the elders were present. Okay, so he knows it's time for me to suffer, right? So he's visiting these little churches, and he's saying goodbye. Okay, he's saying goodbye. Verse 19, after he greeted them, he began to relate one by one the things which God had done among the Gentiles through his ministry. When they heard this, they began glorifying God, and they said to him, You see, brother, how many thousands there are among the Jews of those whom have believed, and they are all zealous for the law. And they have been told about you that you are teaching all the Jews who are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, telling them not to circumcise their children, nor to walk according to the customs. What then is to be done? What are they asking him about? Okay, we talked about the Jerusalem Council last week. What was the conclusion of the Jerusalem Council? When you hear about the Jerusalem Council, what comes to mind? Levi? They wrote a letter. Good. What else about the Jerusalem Council comes to mind? What was the argument or the discussion about? Noah? Circumcision. People had said, in order to become a Christian, you have to become circumcised and you have to follow the law of Moses. Good work. So they took it before the disciples who had walked with Jesus, said, what do we do with this? What did the disciples conclude? And they wrote a letter about it. They concluded 4 things that Christians needed to not do.
They have to stay away from strangled meat.
Yes, stay away from strangled meat. Good. Claire? Not consuming blood. Good. No.
Sexual immorality.
Stay away from sexual immorality. Yep. What's the last one? Things polluted by idols. Yes. So these people are coming to Paul and saying, we hear that you're teaching you don't have to be circumcised or follow the law. They don't have email. They don't have social media. They don't have, maybe they haven't heard what the Jerusalem Council concluded. So they're still going, well, we have to abide by these things to be saved, right? Jesus plus our works. Jesus plus circumcision. Jesus plus following the law. Verse 25. It says, but concerning the Gentiles who have believed, we wrote, having decided that they should abstain from meat sacrificed to idols, and from blood, and from what is strangled, and from fornication. Okay? So Paul was like, oh, by the way, Jerusalem Council met, here we go. Like, this is what they decided. Verse 26. Then Paul took the men the next day, and purifying himself along with them, went into the temple, giving notice of the completion of the days of purification, until the sacrifice was offered for each one of them. They were like, you need to make amends with the Jewish people because they think you've been doing stuff wrong. So he went into the temple and followed some cultural things. Paul was really good at not offending where he didn't have to. Okay, there were things, Paul was not a wimp. He wasn't like, okay, fine, I'll do whatever you say. He withstood Peter to his face. He told Barnabas, absolutely not, we will not take John Mark with us. He didn't follow through last time. He wasn't a wimp. But he's also the one who took Timothy and had him circumcised so that he wouldn't be an offense to the Jews. Okay, so he goes into the synagogue and follows some Jewish customs to not offend. All right? So there are areas in your life, if somebody comes to you and challenges something you know to be absolutely biblically true, do not back down. Okay? Do not back down. But if you go to a different culture, or you go to a different group, or you go someplace and you have your ears pierced, and they say it's highly offensive in our culture for men to have their ears pierced, are you willing to take those out while you're in that culture? Then you don't offend, right? So it's simple things like that. Paul was really good at not offending when he didn't have to. And then there were times where he's like, you know what? The gospel is offensive enough to people That pretty much sums it up. He was willing to offend people with the gospel because the gospel is difficult for people sometimes. But he wasn't willing to offend them with himself so they wouldn't hear the gospel. Does that make sense? The gospel is offensive enough to people. Don't add to it by being offensive. Okay, so then verse 27. Verse 17. They are in Jerusalem. I'm sorry, I thought you were still visiting churches. They're in Jerusalem. Okay, they're talking about the Jerusalem Council. Verse 27. When the 7 days were almost over, the Jews from Asia, upon seeing him in the temple, began to stir up all the crowd and laid hands on him. All right? So, Jews from Asia, gotta watch out for those Asian Jews, guys. They start circulating rumors. They start a riot. They start causing trouble. Did you hear what Paul did? Did you hear about this? Well, what about this? Have you heard? And everybody starts like, right? Have you guys ever had ducks? We had these white ducks, and we called them the farmyard gossips because you would walk past them, and the two white ducks would look at you and like to each other, and we were like, what am I doing wrong? Okay, this is what's happening. There's all these people murmuring and stirring and beginning to cause trouble. So then they start crying out, verse 28, men of Israel, come to our aid. This is the man who preaches to all men everywhere against our people and the law and this place, and besides, he has even brought Greeks into the temple and has defiled this holy place. They're just coming up with stuff, okay? Like, he's stirring up problems and he's doing this. Now, the Jews had a pretty delicate situation with the Romans. If you cause too big of a kerfuffle, the Romans get involved, right? And you don't want to lose the rights you already have from the Romans, so you don't want to cause too big of a kerfuffle. So they're going around going, this guy's going to cause problems. This guy's causing trouble. Look, he brought a Greek guy into the temple. Gasp, right? He didn't actually. They were just making it up. Verse 29, for they had previously seen Trophimus, the Ephesian, in the city with him, and they supposed that Paul had brought him into the temple. That's how riots start, a lot of supposition. Then all the city was provoked. All the city. Picture the entire city of Jerusalem, right? All the city was provoked, and the people rushed together, taking hold of Paul, and they dragged him out of the temple, and immediately the doors were shut. While they were seeking to kill him, okay, this wasn't a calm little mob. They are seeking to kill him. A report came up to the commander of the Roman cohort that all Jerusalem was in confusion, okay? So there's Romans ruling. Now, if I understand correctly, this is the temple. Okay, they've got like courtyards around it and stuff. From what I understand, is this was a Roman building in the courtyard. I may be totally off on this, but if I understand correctly. Okay, so they drag Paul out of the temple, and they're seeking to kill him. And the Roman leader hears the entire city is in an uproar. He probably hears the screaming and the yelling and sees the dirt being thrown in the air and the chaos, right? Well, the Jews aren't just allowed to kill people. The Romans step in. Thank goodness, right? The Jews can't just, it's not just anarchy and mob rule. So a report came to the commander of the Roman cohort that all Jerusalem was in confusion. 32, at once he took along some soldiers and centurions and ran down to them. And when they saw the commander and the soldiers, they stopped beating Paul. Okay, they are in the process of beating Paul. Think of an angry mob. This isn't like, we're annoyed at you. They're beating him to death, okay? They do not like him. They're beating him. Then the commander came up and took hold of him and ordered him to be bound with 2 chains. And he began asking who he was and what he had done. Okay? This is the rescue squad. You think, oh, he's being handcuffed and chained. They're saving his life at this point. Okay? because they were going to beat him to death. Paul knew, I must suffer for God's sake, right? For Christ's sake. I will suffer. Part of being a tool. Verse 34, but among the crowd some were shouting one thing and some another, and when he could not find out the facts because of the uproar, he ordered him to be brought into the barracks. So he's asking people, what's happening? And one person's like, he brought a Greek into the temple, and another guy is like, he's inciting a riot, and another, none of them have the same story. So the Roman guy, fine. So he drags him up to the barracks. When he got to the stairs, he was carried by the soldiers because of the violence of the mob. So he is in Roman custody, he is in handcuffs, and the mob is still attacking him. So the violence of the mob. Verse 36, for the multitude of the people kept following them, shouting, away with him. As Paul was about to be brought into the barracks, he said to the commander, may I say something to you? And he said, do you know Greek? Then you are not the Egyptian who some time ago stirred up a revolt and led 4,000 men of the assassins out into the wilderness? So this Roman guard thinks he's some Egyptian guy who led an issue a while back. And Paul's like, no. Paul said, I am a Jew of Tarsus in Cilicia, a citizen of no insignificant city. And I beg you, allow me to speak to the people. When he says he's a citizen of no insignificant city, what do you think he's talking about? What's the most significant city at the time? What's the most significant city at the time?
Rome.
Hadassah? Rome. He is a citizen of Rome. The Romans had to treat citizens of Rome differently. Remember when they arrested him and beat him, and he told them he was a citizen of Rome, and they oh yikes. Because the Romans had different rules. I think it would be kind of equivalent to Native Americans in the US. We're all US citizens, but if we catch fish the same way Native Americans do, we go to prison and they don't. There's just different rules, okay? So Paul said, I am a citizen of no insignificant city. So he was a Roman citizen. Verse 40. When he, the Roman commander, had given him permission, Paul, standing on the stairs, motioned to the people with his hand. This looks like Luke was there, right? He sees Paul, hey guys, listen up. Motioning to the people with his hand, and when there was a great hush, he spoke to them in the Hebrew dialect, saying, okay, now chapter 22 is his sermon. Okay, so Paul gets drug out of the temple, the doors are slammed, they're beating him to death, the Romans come down their stairs. They were probably in a tower so they could see, because they're dragging him up the stairs, right? They're carrying him up the stairs. So Paul is now preaching. Here's the "you are" here. Okay? Paul is preaching from the top of the stairs to all the angry mob who has just been beating him. And look at his defense. What would be your natural response? If somebody was beating you to death because you brought a Greek into the temple, what would be your natural defense? I did not, right? Our natural defense is to defend ourselves. Look at Paul. Chapter 1 and verse 22. Brethren and fathers, hear my defense, which I now offer to you. Here's his defense. When they had heard that he was addressing them in Hebrew dialect, they became even more quiet. And he said, I am a Jew, born in Tarsus of Cilicia, but brought up in this city, educated under Gamaliel, strictly according to the law of our fathers, being zealous for God, just as you are today. Okay, so he's a Jew. He's a Jew. He's a Roman citizen. He studied under Gamaliel. Gamaliel was a, high up Pharisee dude. He's giving them his past, right? Educated under Gamaliel, strictly according to the law. He follows the law, the Mosaic law. According to the law of our fathers, being zealous for God, just as you are all today. He's like, I am zealous for God. I persecuted this way to the death, binding, putting both men and women in prison. So he persecuted, what's the way? He persecuted Christianity. He's like, I'm zealous. I persecuted Christianity. He was there when they killed Stephen. He got a letter to go to Damascus so he could drag people, Christians, back from Damascus and imprison them. Okay? Verse 5. As also the high priest and all the council of the elders can testify, from them I also received letters to the brethren and started off for Damascus in order to bring even those who were there to Jerusalem as prisoners to be punished. And then he tells them, but as I was on my way to Damascus, I heard there was this huge light. I heard a voice from heaven saying, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And I answered, verse 8, who are you, Lord? And he said to me, I am Jesus the Nazarene, whom you are persecuting. And those who were with me saw the light, to be sure, but did not understand the voice of the one who was speaking to me. And I said, what shall I do, Lord? And the Lord said to me, get up, go on into Damascus, and there you will be told of all that has been appointed for you to do. All right? So he meets Jesus. He meets Jesus and says, God, what am I supposed to do? And God says, I will tell you all that is appointed for you. So why do you think he starts here? Why do you think he starts with the fact that he's a Jew, Hadassah?
So they can relate to him.
They can relate to him? Good. Why else? Why else do you think he starts with the fact that he's a Jew? Who studied under Gamaliel? Why do you think that was a big deal?
Daniel was a big teacher.
Mhm. He had a reputation. Yeah. So they know, oh, he's not getting false teaching. This is right. Right? He studied under the law. He kept the law. They're like, okay, well then he's okay there, right? He persecuted Christianity. He said, I was zealous for the Lord. I thought that this was wrong as well. And then I met Jesus. Verse 10. And I said, what shall I do, Lord? And the Lord sent him to Damascus. Okay, Ananias was sent to him. Verse 14. And Ananias, and he said, the God of our fathers has appointed you to know his will and to see the righteous one and to hear an utterance from his mouth. For you will be a witness for him to all men of what you have seen and heard. Now why do you delay? Get up and be baptized and wash away your sins, calling on his name. Okay? So he meets Jesus. God says, I have things appointed for you to do. Salvation comes. Right? He repents. He's baptized. Okay? God told him to get out of Jerusalem because, verse 18, he's in Jerusalem, he says, and I saw him saying to me, make haste and get out of Jerusalem quickly, because they will not accept your testimony about me. What are you laughing at? I know, it looks like cows. It's cows. I was like, wait a minute, I lost Levi there. He's gone. Okay, come back, Levi. Verse 21. And he said to me, and God said to him, go, for I will send you far away to the Gentiles. They listened to him up until this statement. Then they raised their voices and said, "Away with such a fellow from the earth, for he should not be allowed to live." And as they were crying out and throwing off their cloaks and tossing dust into the air, picture the chaos, right? Paul is standing on top of this stairway. This is full of people. It's now like they're throwing their clothes and they're picking up dirt and like throwing dirt. It's chaos. Okay? The commander ordered him to be brought into the barracks, stating that he should be examined by scourging. What is scourging? If you examine somebody by scourging, what are you doing? Whipping them. Scourging was a whip. Okay? So Paul has just been beaten by these people. He's been handcuffed and drug up this stairway. He preached, and then the Roman goes, maybe he's not telling us the truth. Let's tie him to a post and whip him. Rough day for Paul, huh? He just went into the temple to pray, and this is what happened. Okay? So he should be examined by scourging, verse 24, so that he might find out the reason why they were shouting against him that way. But when they stretched him out with thongs, Paul said to the centurion who was standing by, "Is it lawful for you to scourge a man who is a Roman and uncondemned?" Boom. He just pulls his trump card, right? By the way, I'm a Roman. Whole different set of rules now apply. When the centurion heard this, he went to the commander and told him, saying, "What are you about to do? For this man is a Roman." The commander came and said to him, "Tell me, are you a Roman?" He said, "Yes." The commander answered, "I acquired the citizenship with a large sum of money." What is he saying? You can buy Roman citizenship. The Roman centurion had to buy Roman citizenship. He wasn't born in Rome, so he wasn't technically a Roman. So he paid a lot of money to become a Roman. So he's like, okay, so yeah, I paid through the nose for this. Like, yeah, I'm a Roman. And Paul said, but I was actually born a citizen. I didn't even have to buy it. I was born there. The guy like, so we can't beat him, right? Therefore, those who were about to examine him immediately let go of him. And the commander also was afraid when he found out that he was a Roman, and because he had put him in chains. Dun, 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 you broke the law against the Roman, right? You put him in chains and you were gonna flog him. Oops. But on the next day, wishing to know for certain why he had been accused by the Jews, he released him and ordered the chief priests and all the council to assemble and brought Paul down and set him before them. Okay? So the guy's like, I really don't understand why there was this riot. So he releases Paul. I feel like if I were Paul, I would have been like, can I please stay? Like, your prison is safe. But he releases Paul, and he brings the council. Who does he bring? He brings the council. He brings the chief priests and all the council to assemble, and brought Paul down and set them before him. So he gave everybody a night to cool off. Paul spent the night in prison. The priests had to go find their clothes because they'd been throwing them. They found all their robes and found their stuff. Probably had to shake all the dirt that had been thrown off of them. They got a chance to cool down. The Roman centurion is still like, I don't know why they're so mad at this guy. Like, I feel like if you're in charge of some people, and like, okay, so Jackson's the Roman centurion, right? Class mob rule, we decide we're gonna just beat Noah to death. Jackson's like, guys, why? And we're all like, just kill him, right? And he's like, okay, I'll beat Noah and figure out why. And then Noah's like, nope, I'm a Roman, you can't beat me. Rats, now I'm still curious why I can't beat this, or why this guy is being beat to death in the temple, right? So he goes, okay, everybody calm down. He releases Noah. This is more like a courtroom setting. It's a lot calmer. There's not a riot. Okay, things are easier here. So they're sitting there, and Paul is on trial. Chapter 23. Paul, looking intently at the council, Luke was there. He sees the look on Paul's face, right? Paul, looking intently at the council, said, "Brethren, I have lived my life with a perfectly good conscience before God up to this day." How many of you could say that? I have lived my life with a perfectly good conscience before the Lord up to this day. He says, I have followed everything I was supposed to do. I have done everything I was supposed to do. Nothing about meeting Jesus changed this. Like, I have followed the Lord to the best of my ability, and then I met Jesus and see how he fulfills all of this. I have lived my life with a clear conscience. I haven't done anything wrong. And the high priest Ananias commanded those standing by him to strike him on the mouth. So he's in trial before this Roman dude, and the high priest is like, somebody hit him, right? Just slap him. Okay, they're still kind of volatile. Then Paul said to him, God is going to strike you, you whitewashed wall. Do you sit to try me according to the law, and in violation of the law order me to be struck? Paul loses it for just a second, right? He's like, I'm tired of getting hit. He's like, God's going to strike you, you whitewashed wall. But the bystanders said, do you revile God's high priest? And watch what Paul says. Paul said, I was not aware, brethren, that he was the high priest, for it is written, you shall not speak evil of a ruler of your people. And Paul apologizes. Like, I didn't realize he was the high priest. We can learn a lot from this, guys. As our world digresses, it gets worse and worse and worse. We're going to have a lot more issue with government and with leaders and all that. And it's super hard not to talk trash about them. Right? But look at Paul. He goes, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were in charge. I didn't realize you were the high priest. Okay?
Isn't that same thing, almost the same thing happened with Jesus?
Uh-huh.
Like,
Yeah.
almost word for word.
Very similar. Yeah. Okay, look at verse 6. But perceiving that one group were Sadducees and the other Pharisees, Paul began crying out in the council, Brethren, I am a Pharisee, a son of Pharisees, and I am on trial for the hope and resurrection of the dead. Okay, so Paul pulls a trump card. He has Pharisees. I don't know how to spell that right now. And he has Sadducees. Okay? Pharisees believe in resurrection from the dead. Sadducees do not. Okay? So Paul goes, wait a minute. Half the people here are Pharisees, the other half are Sadducees. Okay, in our world, half are Democrats, half are Republicans, or half, okay, like two very different. Okay, so look at what he does. He goes, oh, I see. I have a mixed crowd. So he says, verse 6, Brethren, I am a Pharisee, a son of a Pharisee. I am on trial for the hope and resurrection of the dead. Boom! Every single Sadducee goes, he's a fake. If he believes in the resurrection of the dead, ah! And the Pharisees go, okay, maybe he's not wrong. And he totally turns them against each other. He totally, now they're fighting amongst themselves. Okay, verse 7, as he said this, there occurred a dissension between the Pharisees and Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. So now, instead of the entire room full of people being angry at Paul, now they're angry at each other. He just rerouted the whole dynamic of the room. Verse 8, for the Sadducees say there is no resurrection, nor an angel, nor a spirit, but the Pharisees acknowledge them all. And there occurred a great uproar, and some of the scribes of the Pharisaic party stood up and began to argue heatedly, saying, we find nothing wrong with this man. Suppose a spirit or an angel has spoken to him. and a great dissension was developing. The commander was afraid Paul would be torn to pieces by them, and ordered the troops to go down and take him away from them by force and bring him back to the barracks. Verse 11, but on the night immediately following, the Lord stood at his side and said, "Take courage, for as you have solemnly witnessed to my cause at Jerusalem, so you must witness to Rome also." So there's this huge issue, all this stuff going on. Paul's in prison. The Lord comes to him and says, "Hey, take courage. You witnessed to me in Jerusalem. You did that well. You witnessed to the Israelites, to the Gentiles. Now you got to go to Rome." Okay? Paul's right on track. We could be like, "Oh man, poor Paul, he got totally waylaid." He is right on track with the Lord's plan for him. Okay? This is all part of it. Right? The prison, the fight, the law, the argument, the riot. God knew what he was doing. Okay? So then we will come, verse 12 through 22. We're not going to read all of it. But basically, all the people who were mad at Paul go, "Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're not going to eat or drink anything until Paul is dead." Right? So this whole half of the room decides we're not going to eat or drink anything until Paul dies. That's a pretty hefty commitment, right? So they know he's going to be transported to a higher official. No more water, Noah. He's going to be transported to a higher official. And so they lay in ambush. Like, they're going to ambush this Roman group of guys and kill Paul. This is how angry they are about this. This is how crazy this situation is getting. So Paul's nephew hears some of them talking, like, "We're not going to eat or drink anything until Paul gets killed." And the nephew, this little guy, we assume he's little because they talk about him like holding his hand, right? And most little Roman guys aren't going to hold the hand of a 23-year-old man. And like, "Come with me." Like, but you get the impression he's a little guy. So he goes to the Roman guy and he's like, "Hey, I heard that they're going to kill Paul. Like, they have an ambush set. They're not going to eat or drink anything until Paul dies. I don't know how they were planning on having the strength to fight if they're not eating or drinking anything, but they did." So the little guy goes, and the Roman guard like, "Hey, let's take this to the commander." So he takes him to the commander and like, "Hey, they're gonna lay in ambush and kill your prisoner. You don't attack a Roman battalion and kill their prisoner, right? Roman guys, if their prisoner gets lost, what happens to them? It's a death sentence. Okay? I'm picturing a whole bunch of little pudgy Pharisees and Sadducees, like, they're not trained in war. They sit around and talk about the law. Okay? All these little, like, waddly guys coming up and, like, taking on a Roman group. And I'm like, yeah, good luck. Right? But they're like, "We're not going to eat or drink anything." So they were thinner. But they got there. Okay? Verse 23. He called to him 2 of the centurions and said, "Get 200 soldiers ready by the 3rd hour of the night to proceed to Caesarea with 70 horsemen and 200 spearmen." Okay, this is the group they're wanting to take on. 70 horsemen, 200 spearmen, and a bunch of hungry Sadducees, right? They're going to take them on. They were also to provide mounts to put Paul on to bring him safely to Felix, the governor. Okay. So he is dealing with a Roman dude in Jerusalem. Okay, and this Roman dude is trying to figure out why they all hate him. He's just going to be Roman dude, okay? And he's been trying to figure out why they hate him. Okay, and it becomes a mob. Every time they're beating him, it's chaos. So then he's going to send him to Felix, who is what? It says there, he's the governor. Okay, so I'm not exactly sure how Roman government works. Never really studied it out all that much, okay? But picture our government. If you offend the police officer in Malala, okay, start a riot, people are throwing dirt, clothes, all the things, he puts you in prison for the night. Now he's gonna transport you to Portland to stand before the governor. Okay, Tina Kotek, has that been a governor? Is she sworn in yet? No. Kate Brown. Okay, so they're gonna take you to the governor. Where does Caesar fall in this? Because God says you're gonna go to Caesar. Caesar would be equivalent to, what's a present fight? I almost wrote Bush and was like, no, that's not it. I'm reading a book right now that was set when Bush was in presidency, so that's where it's coming from, okay? So we have a long way to go. He's talking to the Roman dude, the Malala cop. He's gonna go to the governor now, okay? 70 spearmen, 200 horsemen, or 70 horsemen, 200 spearmen, Paul's on a horse. I love this story. I just picture all these Sadducees like chasing Paul's horse, like, right? Trying to just kill him. So the Roman dude writes a letter, and he wrote the letter having this form, 26. Claudius Lysias to the most, okay, his name was Claudius Lysias. To the most excellent governor, Felix, greetings. When this man was arrested by the Jews and was about to be slain by them, I came up to them with troops and rescued him, having learned that he was a Roman. Notice he rescued him since he thought he was a Roman. He didn't learn he was a Roman after he almost flogged him. He's sugarcoating his letter. When this man was arrested by the Jews and was about to be slain by them, I came up to them with the troops and rescued him, having learned that he was a Roman. And wanting to ascertain the charge for which they were accusing him, I brought him down to their council, and I found him to be accused over questions about their law, but under no accusation deserving death or imprisonment. He has violated nothing Roman. Okay? The guy literally had to rescue him from his own people because they thought he had broke the law, the Jewish law. Okay? So Felicia's family really toes the line on you can't wear pink on Saturday, right? You absolutely cannot wear pink on Saturday. Is that an Oregon law? No, it's a Brody law, right? You can't wear pink on Saturday. Okay? So Felicia, her mom thinks that she wears pink on Saturday. So they start beating her and attacking her and like they're gonna kill her, right? You wore pink on Saturday, you're done. So the cops get involved and come and rescue her. Okay? So the cops are telling the governor she hasn't broken any Roman law. She hasn't broken any actual law, just that the Jews think she violated and she wore pink on Saturday, right? So that's what he's telling them about Paul. He hasn't done anything wrong, but I had to rescue him because they're mad because they think he broke their law. Okay? 29, and I found him to be accused over questions about their law, but under no accusation deserving death or imprisonment. When I was informed that there would be a plot against the man, I sent him to you at once, also instructing his accusers to bring charges against him before you. Okay, so they take him by night, they get him to Felix, all right? So now Felix's job, the Jews can come before Felix. The Jews can come before Felix and accuse him. And there's going to be a lot more organization, right? It's not going to be just some Roman dude or Claudius Lysias trying to fend off the chaos. This is going to have to be a lot more organized. Okay, so he sends Paul to him. I have always wondered what happened to the guys who said they would never eat or drink. At what point did they go, yeah, I'm thirsty, and he's in Felix's custody. We're not going to be able to kill him. Or did they actually stick to it and die? Right? That it just ends. Like there's no more information about them. Verse 34. Okay, so he goes to Felix. When he had read it, he asked from what province he was, and when he learned that he was from Cilicia, he said, I will give you a hearing after your accusers arrive also, giving orders for him to be kept in Herod's praetorium. Okay, so he goes, all right, if people come to accuse you, you can stand trial. Until then, you're in jail, right? In Herod's praetorium. Verse chapter 24, after 5 days, the high priest Ananias came down with some elders with an attorney named Tertullius, and they brought charges to the governor against Paul. After Paul had been summoned, Tertullius began to accuse him, saying to the governor, since we have through you attained much peace. Okay, so we have Ananias and Tertullius. They come before Paul, or they come to accuse Paul. Okay, Tertullius is the attorney. Look at how he sucks up to Felix, right? He says, since we have through you attained much peace, and since by your providence reforms are being carried out for this nation. So he's like, oh, Felix, under you we've had great peace. He's a lawyer. He is doing the lawyer thing, right? Since by your providence reforms are being carried out for this nation, we acknowledge this in every way and everywhere, most excellent Felix, with all thankfulness. But that I may not weary you any further, I beg you to grant us by your kindness a brief hearing. Okay, picture this sappy lawyer who's just conniving, right? Verse 5, for we have found this man a real pest, and a fellow who stirs up dissension among all the Jews throughout the world, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. And he even tried to desecrate the temple, and then we arrested him. We wanted to judge him according to our own law, but Lysias, the commander, came along, and with much violence took him out of our hands. Is that what happened? Absolutely not. They were beating him to death. They were not trying him. They were beating him to death. Okay? And yes, Lysias came along and took him out of their hands. Okay? He says, ordering his accusers to come before you. By examining him yourself concerning all these matters, you will be able to ascertain the things of which we accuse him. The Jews also joined in the attack, asserting that all these things were so. When the governor had nodded for him to speak, Paul responded. Okay? And we're going to take a break, and then we're going to get Paul's response. So take a break. Sure.